Brian was utterly baffled when Peter casually stripped naked while chatting with him. When Brian confronted him, Peter remained unapologetic, insisting it was perfectly normal since, in his view, everyone got naked in front of their dogs. He even pointed out that Brian was always in his birth suit, except on rainy days. Meanwhile, at Jameswood High, Meg's best friends informed her about a notorious bully, Mike Pulaski, whose reputation for intimidation left students trembling. Later that evening, after showering, Brian was struck by yet another shock. Peter was shaving his face completely naked in the bathroom. Brian reprimanded Peter for his lack of decency, but Peter simply shrugged it off, declaring that it was his house and he could do whatever he pleased. At school, Meg accidentally bumped into Mike, spilling her lunch all over him. Mike glared at her with a menacing smirk and declared that on Friday at 3 p.m. he would destroy her. Word of their impending showdown spread like wildfire. The fight's details, along with a grim prediction of Meg's memorial service, were even engraved on the school's founding stone. Meg was terrified and sought a way out. Her friends suggested she avoid the fight altogether. Desperate, Meg begged Lois to transfer her to another school, but Lois refused, citing financial constraints that made private school out of reach. Determined to get expelled, Meg uploaded a sex tape, hoping it would spark enough outrage to get her kicked out. To her dismay, the tape garnered only a single view, by Stewie. Frustrated, Meg turned to the 4 toughest guys in school, hoping they would take on Mike for her. They agreed, but only if she paid them $1,000, a price she couldn't afford. The next day, her hopes were crushed when she found the Fantastic Four beaten to a pulp, stacked on top of each other like ragdolls. On the nearby wall, a chilling message written in blood warned, "Meg, you're next." Distraught, Meg fled to the bathroom in tears. To her shock, she discovered Quagmire hiding in one of the stalls, running a secret operation within the high school. Quagmire offered to help her take down Mike, explaining that he had once been in her shoes and knew how to face bullies like him. The next morning, Meg visited Quagmire's place to begin her training. Curious about his motivation, she asked why he was helping her. Quagmire revealed that he'd spent years studying how the human body could endure extreme conditions, promising to teach Meg how to turn her disadvantages into strengths. Meanwhile, Peter continued testing Brian's patience with his endless nudity stunts. Frustrated, Brian turned to Stewie for advice. Stewie suggested Brian fight fire with fire, shave off all his fur and confront Peter in his own shocking way. Brian, reluctantly agreeing, transformed into what Stewie described as a shaven Christmas turkey. He climbed onto Peter, forcing him to endure his wriggly, bony furless form until Peter begged for mercy and promised to stay clothed in Brian's presence. At school, the dreaded day arrived. Meg faced Mike after classes as a crowd gathered to witness the spectacle. Mike wasted no time, landing a hard punch to her face before grabbing her by the shirt and pummeling her repeatedly. Quagmire, watching from the sidelines, signaled for Meg to unleash her secret weapon. Meg, drawing on Quagmire's unorthodox training, shocked the crowd, and Mike, by kissing him full on the lips. Disgusted and enraged, Mike prepared to strike her again, but Meg dodged and retaliated by popping a massive facial zit, hurling its pus directly at his face. Mike, overcome with nausea, began vomiting uncontrollably. Just when he thought it couldn't get worse, Meg upped the ante. She lifted her shirt. What Mike saw defied description. His eyes bled, his mouth hung open in sheer horror, and his body convulsed. Unable to withstand the sight, Mike melted into a gruesome heap of flesh, bone and ash. Quagmire congratulated Meg for her bravery and unconventional tactics, calling her a true fighter. Meanwhile, back at the Griffin house, Stewie could no longer bear the sight of a hairless Brian. Taking matters into his own hands, he dressed Brian in his own tiny clothes and used a black marker to draw fake hair on his head, declaring him presentable once more.